It would move me to tears if I still had tears to shed.
Hey kiddos, thanks so much for joining me for episode 18 of Chronicles and Collecting, where we're going to take a look at the Mondo Batman the Animated Series Mr. Freeze Mondo exclusive Deluxe Edition action figure. This is the second figure from the line that we're looking at. I'm going through them in the order that they were reviewed. So like I said, this is the second figure in the line. The first one was the Batman with the blue cape. This figure came out in January of 2020, and there's two different versions. There's the regular version, which retailed for $130, and the Mondo Deluxe exclusive edition that retailed for $145. For that 15 extra dollars, you get a few extra accessories. You get sort of like a cracked Mr. Freeze helmet, which we'll look at in a second. You get a different face, kind of a more somber, depressed-looking face, if you could imagine that for Mr. Freeze. And finally, you get a tombstone with his wife's name on it and some snow. So, $15, you get a few extra things, which is, pretty cool. For anyone who's watched Batman the Animated Series, you know that Mr. Freeze is one of the most popular villains from that show. So Batman the Animated Series ran for 85 episodes from 1992 to 1995. It also had a 24-episode follow-up called The New Batman Adventures that ran from 97 to 99. It followed the same continuity, but it had different character designs. They were sort of more, say, simplified, I think, to make it probably easier and cheaper to animate. Now, Heart of Ice was the episode where Mr. Freeze debuted in the Batman the Animated Series. It's one of the most famous and well-known episodes of that series. It's won tons of awards and really put both the show and the creators, including Paul Dini and Bruce Timm, sort of on the map. What's so unique about that episode is that it kind of changed the comic backstory of Mr. Freeze to make it more tragic, to make him a more kind of relatable person, and more of a not just a mustache-twirling villain, someone that had sort of shades of gray in his character, and that was maybe once a good person, but had a bad event that happened to him that, changed him, not unlike Batman and many of the other heroes and villains of the show. And that was one of the things that really made Batman the Animated Series such a great interpretation of these characters. It wasn't just like, oh, I'm whoever, and I have this gimmick, and I'm going to be evil. It was sort of really trying to get into the backstory and the psyches and how these kind of ordinary people, or sometimes extraordinary people, became these larger-than-life villains and heroes. And you see that for characters, other than Mr. Freeze. But the Heart of Ice episode is a great episode to check out. It doesn't really require you having seen any of the other episodes to understand it. For the most part, you could really kind of pick any episode of Batman the Animated Series to watch. There is an order to them, but it's not like a strong, continuous story. There are some events that happen, that show up later on. For example, when Robin joins, or when Batgirl joins, or something like that. And sometimes, if a villain returns, they might, make some reference to that villain's original appearance. But for the most part, you could just pick an episode. And I believe the series is streaming on HBO Max, or you can pick up the Blu-rays or the DVDs. But anyway, let's get into the figure. Like I said, this is the deluxe edition that retailed for under $45. I had originally bought the regular edition because the deluxe edition was out of stock, and then they got the deluxe edition in stock randomly one day, so I bought a second one. So I did get this for retail, but I do have an extra one. They're both out of print right now. I believe this is not the first time they've gone out of print, and they have restocked in the past, but that was, a year or so, almost 2 years ago now. So I'm not sure if they're going to get, if they're ever going to make more. I'm not 100% sure what the going rate is on eBay for these. So if you kind of just to go over what I thought about the Batman figure from this series, I really liked it. It's big, it's nice and detailed for what it is. The character designs are, mostly kind of big, bold lines with, solid colors. So there's not necessarily a ton of detail to show on the Batman figure, but it was nice what they had. My problems were a little bit with some of the quality, some of the paint quality, maybe wasn't quite up to snuff, and I thought the joints were maybe a little stiff, but we did eventually loosen them up and kind of get to make the pose I wanted to make. Okay, so here is Mr. Freeze. And there's kind of two things in here. So let's start off with opening up the figure, and then we'll get to some of these accessories. So here's kind of the base figure. All right, this one's got some tape on it. I guess they took some cues from the Soul of Chogokin ones. Maybe they watched my videos, and that's how they found out about it. Probably not would be my guess, but you never know. I think there's all the tape on it. All right, well, much easier once I got the tape off. All right, so let's take a look at this guy. Wow, these accessories are like humongous, which I guess makes sense because the figure is humongous, but when you see the pictures, it really doesn't do them justice. So here is Mr. Freeze. So as you can see, very, very true to the Batman the Animated Series look. You get some really, really nice shading on the face. It looks like they did something similar to the Batman figure, where they're kind of like trying to portray the lighting. So you can kind of see, if you look at it from the side, you can see that his face is like a different color, and there's kind of stuff here that's, I think, supposed to be how it's reflecting in the light. I'm not crazy about that. I think it's a really good idea on paper, but it doesn't seem to really quite play out. The painting and the detailing is pretty nice on this one. A few scuffs here and there, but nothing too horrible to complain about. All right, so I'm gonna stand this guy up over here, and you could also see kind of on the legs and the I don't know what you call it, his armor or whatever this is. You can kind of see where they're trying to do that different lighting. I kind of said in the Batman video, I think that it would make sense if there was like some playset or diorama where there was a light source to kind of give you an idea of like, okay, here's where the light's coming from, here's how it's reflecting. But I think that when you just have a figure in and of itself, I think it misses the mark a little bit, but certainly not the end of the world. All right, so we have kind of like his tank for the back. This is cool. It's supposed to be like, you could put it on his helmet to kind of show like his helmet got broke and, it's heating up or cooling off or whatever. Here's the actual helmet. I guess my initial thought is that it's a little cloudy, not quite as clear as I would hope it to be, but again, not the end of the world. Got a few extra faces. We got the Mr. Freeze gun, kind of also trying to do that thing with the lighting. The gun looks awesome. I think just the way that this figure is made, it really helps. I think it just really helps emphasize the the shapes and the geometry of the figures, and you can see there's lots of very strong shapes in this. You have the strong cylinder shape and the very sharp edges and the very round circle parts of the cylinder. And I think that this style really helps emphasize that. You got this cool beam effect, which I'll certainly be using when I pose it. So that's like I said, that's kind of the first part of the figure. And then here's the second part of the figure that has the hands and the Mondo exclusive parts. Let me just make sure there's no tape on here. There is not. Side. So we have a frozen Batarang, which is cool. Here's kind of the cracked helmet. If you want to recreate some of the scenes from the show. There's kind of a variety of different hands. I'm not going to kind of go through all of them. I think very funny, similar to the last one, there are 7 extra hands. So the Batman had just one with a thumbs up, and I think this just has one. I don't know exactly what it's holding. I just find it funny that all of them have an odd number of hands. Maybe that's just because the robot spirits and the Chogokin stuff I normally look at always have an even number of hands. But it's you can give a thumbs up, but only with your right hand. Hope you're not left-handed. This is like the more kind of somber. Hold on, I'm blocking it here. Kind of the more somber looking Mr. Freeze face. Get my tweezers here to try to get this out. This is like a little trilling glass bottle thing. That to the camera. That's features heavily in the episode if you've not seen it. Here's the kind of big tombstone. This is again a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to just be like a little thing like this that you put on like top of a cake on Halloween, but this is like half the size of the figure itself. And then also similar to the Batman figure, there is a stand. Now, one of the things I really liked about the Batman figure was that it had a kind of custom stand. This one's a little disappointing because it's also just the bat signal. I kind of wish it was something more relevant to Mr. Freeze. Like, why would Mr. Freeze be standing on a Batman stand? That's sort of silly. But, not the end of the world. It's still nice that it comes with a stand. As you can see, it kind of doesn't really need the stand on its own. So it's nice that they kind of threw it in. And then here's the one last thing that we have here, this other face. This is kind of like his angry face. I think this one actually looks the coolest. I think this is probably the one that I'm going to use when I do my posing. And sort of speaking of that, I'm going to hit pause for a second. I'm going to kind of put this guy together, kind of get him in the pose that I like. And then I will come back and we'll do some final thoughts and we'll compare him to the Batman figure that we opened up about a month ago. And we are back, and as you can see, I got him posed, kind of fighting Batman. He's shooting the freeze gun. Batman's choosing the batarang. Mr. Freeze a little higher, but that's just because he's on the rotating stand. Let's rotate this so you can get a kind of full 360 view of what he looks like while I sort of give my final thoughts. Oops, I don't know what I'm doing here. There we go. Make sure I don't get hit here, nor anything else that I have off camera here. But as you can see, another really nice figure. I think it really captures Mr. Freeze, and I think that the Mr. Freeze kind of character design really fits the style of this figure well. I think almost kind of like the cell shadedness of him really comes through, especially in the face. There are a few downsides. I think the quality issues from the first figure are not as prevalent on the Mr. Freeze, but still a little bit there. Even just trying to get the gun to the hand, there's a little bit of the paint rubbed off, and even the hand that came on him that I didn't do anything to, a little bit of the paint was rubbing off, but kind of not the end of the world. I'm also a little disappointed that this helmet is not super clear. It's very foggy, which again is a little bit of disappointment because you can't really see that really nice detailing on the face that I was just going on about how much I really liked. One last kind of complaint that I'd say I have is that it was really hard to figure out which hand the gun fit in and to actually get the gun to fit in the hand. I actually wound up just going to the listing on Mondo.com and looking to see the position of the thumb and trying to figure out what hand it was. As far as I could tell, it is the hand that there's only a right. I said there was a seventh hand that was right hand only. Apparently that's the one for the gun. So if you want to have Mr. Freeze shooting with his left hand, you are out of luck apparently. Again, it's just a weird decision to not have a matching hand on each side. But these are kind of minor complaints, but it is an expensive figure. I'm still really happy with it. I think at $130 for the base edition, I think it's a really good deal for such like an iconic, almost definitive version of Mr. Freeze, especially more so than the other characters. Catwoman from Batman the Animated Series, probably not the definitive version. Maybe if that's the one you grew up with. I think the Batman from Animated Series is a great version, but I still don't know if it's quite the definitive version of Batman. But this is the definitive version of Mr. Freeze. So I think it's probably one of the coolest figures to have from the Animated Series collection. And as I kind of mentioned during the Batman video, I think that the Batman looks cooler when you have kind of other figures in the series of the same style sort of next to it and interacting with it. So I was really happy to see all of these, kind of together. Like I said, $130, I think it's a great buy. At $145, if you want the extra stuff, that's also good. Unfortunately, they're out of stock right now. Don't know if they're coming back in stock. My guess would be no. But if you could pick it up for somewhere around retail, I still think that would be, a good pickup, especially if you like this character design and you kind of grew up with this interpretation of Mr. Freeze. All right, let's pause this. Anyway, let's get him on the level with Batman. You kind of see these two guys really going at it. Something like this. Anyway, you get the point. Anyway, thanks so much for joining me for this episode of Chronicles and Collecting. New episodes go up every Wednesday, and please make sure to join me for next week's episode where we're going to take a look at the Master Gundam and the Funsaki, as well as do a little bit of a primer in G Gundam, and also going to take a look at the Master Gundam option part set. Anyway, thank you so much for watching the video, and keep collecting.